Hello, everybody. Great to see you, and thank you for coming to this breakout session on leveraging trade to advance U.S. and Africa business goals. My name is Whitney Schneidman, and I chair the Africa practice at Continental, which is a law firm. But I've long been involved in U.S.-African relations, served as Deputy Assistant Secretary of State for African Affairs during the Clinton administration. I was so proud to have been one of the ones to work to get the African Growth and Opportunity Act passed through Congress. That was 20 years ago, but the trade and investment agenda has just grown since then. So this panel will really focus on those issues, and we're just thrilled to have three panelists who I think are just right at the cutting edge of U.S.-Africa trade and investment. Let me first, I'll just brief them, I'll introduce them briefly, and then we'll get into the conversation. Toya Nwesu-Owegbu is a communications advisor for Prosper Africa, which is one of the lead U.S. programs promoting U.S. trade and investment in Africa. Abdi Wahab Mohammed has been the Minnesota Trade Office's regional trade manager for Africa, and he's in Minnesota. And then Alexander Nishimiyane is in Rwanda, the northern province, up by the volcanoes, as I said earlier, not the ones going off, but he's a YALI alum and a passionate agripreneur, and I think can bring a lot to this discussion. So let's just get into it. And the way this will work, we'll hear from our three panelists. They'll make some initial presentations. I'll do some Q&A, and then we'll get some questions from those who are participating in this great and vital YALI Summit. So with that, Toyin, let me turn it over to you for the first contribution.
Great. Thank you, Whitney, so much for the wonderful and warm welcome. So good day, everyone. It is a pleasure to join YALI in the Wilson Center today to mark this momentous occasion ahead of Africa Day. Thank you all for having me. As Whitney mentioned, through Prosper Africa, it is a U.S. government initiative committed to bolstering two-way trade and investment by addressing the constraints faced by U.S. and African businesses and identifying new opportunities for shared prosperity. During his video remarks at the African Union Summit earlier this year, President Biden reaffirmed the administration's commitment to strengthening U.S.-Africa relations by working together to advance shared vision of a better future, a future of growing trade and investment that advances prosperity for all of our nations. And through Prosper Africa, we examine what the U.S. government has done in the past. We've learned from those challenges the private sector has faced and identified a pathway forward for a whole of government approach to enhancing U.S.-Africa trade and investment. So this includes modernizing and synchronizing the U.S. government's trade and investment toolkit, making it easier for businesses and investors to access the tools and resources available to them. Prosper Africa is a one-stop shop that brings together the full suite of U.S. government services and resources across 17 participating agencies to provide four key things: market intelligence, deal support, financing, and solutions to strengthen business climate. This approach has the potential to substantially increase two-way trade and investment, accelerating economic growth, driving job creation, and helping investors best respond to emerging opportunities. Since launching Prosper Africa in June 2019, the U.S. government has helped close 500 deals across 44 African countries for an estimated total value of $47 billion in new exports and investments. We're building on this momentum now. Through a true two-way trade and investment partnership, the U.S. government is committed to driving sustainable growth across the continent and supporting economic recovery at home as all of our nations build back together. Moving forward, our approach to Africa remains strategic, yet diversified, because we understand that there is no blanket one-size-fits-all approach to each market or region or even across sectors. We are encouraged that despite COVID's economic challenges, Q1 2021 data is already showing a positive uptick in two-way trade with Africa as we begin to see markets rebound. We are renewing our commitment to engaging and providing targeted support to the African diaspora, especially in growing sectors such as ICT, health, infrastructure, and financial services. We see a huge opportunity for shared learning and capacity building moving forward. And as I sit here today, I know that we cannot talk about Africa's economic development without acknowledging the vibrancy of the continent's young, urban population, which is increasingly more digitally connected to the world, with almost half of the population already subscribed to mobile services and 50% using smartphones. So that brings me to my next point. In tech, we're seeing an increasing number of US tech, entertainment, and angel investors investing in businesses of all sizes on the continent. At Prosper Africa, we also see this as an opportunity to better support US investors that also seek to address the challenges hindering the growth in this of the tech sector. So that includes energy access, infrastructure, and scaling critical digital infrastructure. We cannot overlook the role tech will play in sectors impacted by COVID-19. So I'll give you an example. Prosper Africa recently supported Field Intelligence. It's a Nigeria and Kenya-based health tech company to secure $3.6 million in investment. The company is using that investment to help pharmacies manage their inventory and stock high-quality medicines, which we know is a critical innovation in the wake of COVID-19. For young entrepreneurs interested in engaging with Prosper Africa, there are a number of tools and resources that I can share with you today. So first, USAID has trade and investment programs across the continent to help African entrepreneurs and business leaders with matchmaking and due diligence. Very important. USAID is set to launch a major new continent-wide trade and investment program later this year that will scale up a wide range of services from business consulting and transaction facilitation to targeted policy intervention. Because we understand that economic development does not happen in silos. So the soundness of the operating and regulatory environment is also very important. USAID programs can help African producers connect to new markets and add value to their products through investments in their equipment and operations. USAID can help African businesses export to the US by taking full advantage of trade preferences currently under AGOA and beyond, which you mentioned, Whitney. Under AGOA, eligible countries can export products, including value-added manufactured items such as apparel to the United States duty-free. We have an example. So Tahira and Phil's, which was a Guinean-based palm oil business, they were ready to expand beyond the local market and needed support to compete in foreign markets. So through USAID's West Africa Trade and Investment Hub, they gained expertise on exporting to the U.S. under AGOA and registered their product with the U.S. Food and Drug Administration. And through this technical assistance, they were able to ship their first container of palm oil to a distributor in Maryland. Second, the U.S. African Development Foundation, which is USADF, offers grants up to $250,000 for African grassroots enterprises and social entrepreneurs. And third, if you're looking to raise debt or equity, capital, or both, I would encourage you to check out Prosper Africa's new virtual deal room. The deal room includes a diverse pool of investors looking for businesses like yours to invest in. It also provides African businesses with a light touch advisory support to get investment ready. And finally, Prosper Africa deal teams in the United States and at U.S. embassies across Africa are standing by and ready to help your businesses to identify partners, advance opportunities, and close deals. So in closing, because I know I've given you a lot of information, my last big piece of advice for young African entrepreneurs seeking cross-border growth for their businesses is to get in touch with us at Prosper Africa. We're here to help guide you and provide you with as much information on the resources available to you through the U.S. government. Because working with us is the way to go. You can browse the U.S. government's full trade investment toolkit at prosperafrica.gov, or you can get in touch with our team of trade and investment advisors by emailing us at prosperafrica@usaid.gov. Thank you so much for your time, and I look forward to an engaging session with you all today.
Toyin, thank you so much for that great overview. It's so wonderful to hear those numbers. Number one, $47 billion of deals. That's a big number. Gets people's attention. So I can't wait to get into that in the Q&A. And I'm so glad that you mentioned my favorite website, prosperafrica.gov, because that is where the action is. So look forward to coming back to you. So let's go over to Abu in Minneapolis, Minnesota, and love to hear your perspective from the Midwest of the U.S. as it concerns Africa. Over to you, Abdul. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Mr. Toyin. Appreciate it. My colleagues and everyone, I say hi. My name is Abdul Wahab Mohammed. I represent the state of Minnesota in its trade engagements with Africa. I'm here as a state employee, but also I don't see any of my other state colleagues like last time. So I'll just go ahead and present broadly about what do states do. And Toyin, my colleague here, has talked about the federal government engagement, the Power Africa initiative. So I'll be sharing with you about what do the 50 states do in engaging with Africa. So even though I represent Minnesota, I'll try to broaden my presentation. I'm glad to join you here today. It's been a great honor to talk to our emerging African young leaders, and it could not come at a better time when we need to pick up business with the years. Now, I represent trade with Africa, Middle East, and India, but in this presentation, I will focus on Africa. Minnesota is home to one of the largest and diverse, diaspora communities. I talk about diaspora communities. I believe the engagements are led by people. Minnesota is home to one of those great and vibrant diaspora communities. Minnesota is one of the states, a gross domestic product of about $333 billion. We've exported about $22, $23 billion worth of merchandise and, products to the world. About 225 million of that went to Africa, and there's a great deal of products coming in from Africa. I say this to highlight the current business relations we have with the African continent. We do a lot of exports, and this is led by the Minnesota companies and small and medium. About 75% of those initiatives are led by the Minnesota, small and medium companies that are greatly working with their peers and business people across the continent. Why do states do or hire people like me? Why do we do export promotion? This is to enhance the economies. Export promotion and international, trade supports jobs back home here in Minnesota, and also it's a great way to for companies to increase their income and also, diversify their products. If you're producing only locally and you're not doing international business, you're missing out. So we do help companies get out there more. The states now actively engage in trade investment. I think each of the 50 states have a trade promotion office that mainly does trade missions, trade shows, technical assistance to companies, preparing companies for the export readiness. And, we also have overseas office representations that offer counseling. Now, what do we do as a state of Minnesota? We have an Africa office that engages with businesses that are willing to either invest in Minnesota or that are willing to, buy from Minnesota companies. So those offices are really a great way we connect with the African continent. And they lead our trade and export initiative. But we also do trade missions. We have had the last trade mission to South Africa back in 2018. Our governor is very much, investing or going out there to meet with African leaders to do business. But then with the pandemic, we are not doing any other trade shows now. But we hope to have that service back. We also do virtual trade missions. We do buyers initiative. We also invite businesses from the African continent to come to Minnesota and meet with businesses so they can also buy products from Minnesota or work with companies. So we do that. We also do protocol. That means if we have offices or foreign dignitaries coming from Africa or any other state, we do receive them here in Minnesota, make sure that protocols are observed, and make sure there's a business, business is discussed. What do we see our trade and export promotion go in the next few years? We hope to increase that number of Africa representations that we have offices across Africa. Now we only have one in South Africa that represents across all the regions. So we will like to expand on that. And we also are very much looking into the African Free Continent Trade Agreement that will make sure there's a one market, Africa market. So that is something that we're really hopeful to exploit and make sure that there's a business to business relations in there. What do you as a young African leader can do to work with the states? As I said earlier, there are foreign offices, and you can get engaged with these offices or with the states in two ways. If you're a business person, we welcome you to visit those offices. We welcome you to explore investments in Minnesota. We welcome you to work with our Fortune 500 companies that are always working with distributors all over the continent. If you're a business, you can take advantage of that, and also definitely work with the federal agencies, the embassies, the Africa, the Prosper Africa Initiative. You can also work with that. But I welcome you to work with our foreign offices as well. As an individual, if you're an industry leader, if you have an authority in the industry, you know your industry well, do try to work with also the foreign offices that we have in the continent. They are always doing market research for our companies. They are always identifying prospects or people who will work with our companies as a distributor. So you can always get engaged with that and start your career either working with them or working as a business that is contracted with one of our businesses. We're always looking for domestic partners in Africa. So as a conclusion to my remarks, there's a lot of initiatives that is done by each state, and I welcome you to visit organizations like SIDO, who have the 50 states. I think there's a trade directory of offices that you can call, the numbers that you can talk to in any state you want to work with, and identify opportunities there. So welcome you to use that website and look at the numbers that you can reach out to. Thank you.
Joel, thank you so much for that presentation. It's just great to see the participation in the chat room with folks from Cameroon, Angola, Mali, Ghana, Madagascar, Washington, D.C., Benin, South Africa, Burkina Faso. And I just think that gives some sense of the flavor here. And I just want to underscore one point that Abdul said in the closing. If you're interested to find a partner from the U.S., the state trade agencies are the ideal points of contact. You've got Prosper Africa on the one hand, which is here in Washington, D.C., but you also have state trade agencies. So if you're in a particular sector and you know that a company is in a certain state, you can go right to that state trade agency and begin a conversation, or you can work through Prosper Africa. But I think it's just great to learn about what you're doing, Abdul. So thanks for that. So let me go to our third panelist, Alex in Rwanda. Alex, you've had tremendous experience as an agripreneur, both in Rwanda and Zimbabwe. You're a YALI alum, so please share with us your thoughts for this great conversation. Over to you.
Much. My name is Alexandre. The heart of Africa. I'm so YALI crack at Atlanta University, 2018. When I joined the fellowship, I only had B, but when I came out from I have more than one business. So it was a life-changing experience that, and there were so many opportunities. Yeah, storytelling and everything in the form of stories. Back when I was in school, and every asked what our parents, and they asked and mother, and everything does your mother. I always said nothing, and it's always exciting to see others talking about as a doctor, others are lawyers. Me, I felt because she did, I felt like it was nothing. But to the same spec, I will say it is the best, especially, and I will say it is the best time to be in Africa. Africans would wish to go in the US, in Europe, they wish to go to, but I have had the same wish, but today I'm not in the US. I'm not. I have moved to those places. So what I really Africa. Um, and this is the best time we feel about it. And Continental Free Trade Area. Yeah, and it's young understand even what it is. Take time to read, even. But this is a thing that has ever happened in Africa ever since independence. It means if they don't know, I think they should do. This is the only movement that will make me really feel what I will do there, and about he's from here. I have the right business anyway in Africa. Everything like smooth, and there are so many opportunities. These opportunities, we young people. This is a long term goal. Everything is a long term, and grandfathers, of course, are still gonna hold on to this African. So when I come back, I Pacific Exchange, which is a one component of the program. We got host. It was my host in professional skill development in Texas, and then came back in Rwanda. But for me, I always look at Africa, and I said it is the best. So my project was around East Africa. So we looked at Uganda, we looked at Tanzania, and our project about to became very successful, and we managed to. And the business was really booming. Still affected a little bit, but the challenges are there that we are navigating anything about export to the US. So many challenges, but successfully managed it. During my US as well, I from Georgia, Atlanta, from Texas, and there is a company that was much interested. They kept in touch, and they were very much interested to come to Africa. And the of 2020 COVID restriction, I moved it. I had traveled. It was in a very big electrical challenge. Excuse me. And it started there as a company, already working with the rural electrification project, big farms, and also solar mining. I will say one from Rwanda, the other, and the other one from Tanzania, a little bit on hold, but we will still pick up when things get back to and people and the really do what they do it at the best. Great things are ahead, and today we can, and these opportunities come in. I was not a fellow. I started the business as a fellow, but now I am there. Yeah.
Great. And Shimi Yamana, thank you so much for that great presentation. Many issues you just raised. Certainly your emphasis of the African Continental Free Trade Agreement is something that many of us share its importance to the future of the continent. There's no question about it. So let's just shift to the Q&A. I've got some questions here. I think we'll get some questions from the chat, but let me start with you, Toyin. How do you, what do you see as the biggest opportunities right now? So when you're doing your work at Prosper Africa and U.S. companies reach out to you, how do you talk about the continent in terms of what is the biggest opportunity today and what should they be focused on?
I think when we look at what are the biggest opportunities, we look at, the sectors in which, a lot of our investments are coming out of. So energy, agribusiness, ICT. I mean, ICT cuts across so many different subsectors, healthcare, environmental technology, aerospace and defense, financial services, food and beverage. So I think when we are talking to, investors across the U.S. And being able to see the work that the U.S. government has invested in. We're also highlighting those opportunities at prosperafrica.gov for people to see the emerging sectors and where there are opportunities for growth and investment as
well. Thanks for that. I think sort of the landscape is really important to keep in mind. Abdul, let me ask you a question that's come in and combine two questions. One is, how can people get in touch with you, with state trade agencies? But I think more specifically, we have one question that came in. How can the state trade agency help Nigeria? Which goes to the question of, the companies that you represent in Minnesota, does it have a certain country focus when it comes to Africa, or do you deal with all 54 countries on the continent?
Two great questions. I think we will knock out the first one. It's the easier one. There is a link from our host, Hannah. She posted our department, but I'll also put in our a link to my information, the contacting the specific office that I hold, the trade office. And also, as I said, if you're looking at all the other 50 states, SIDO website is the best place to start. It has I think a contact phone number for the leadership at every state's trade office. So I'll post that link as well. Second question, specific to Nigeria, how do we help or strengthen business relations with Nigeria and Minnesota? If I come back to an Africa initiative that we did, we have a work plan that I'm working on. I represent the 50 for some countries that are in Africa. What I do normally is write a work plan every year of countries of focus that we want to work with that year. Nigeria is of course, with the population and the economy growth, is one of the largest, or if not the largest, the economy in Africa. There is potential that businesses are unfamiliar with the African continent, so the normal way they start is maybe South Africa, and then that's how they go into start offices in other countries in Africa. But what do I do specifically? I work with Chamber of Commerce's, with the embassies, the Nigerian embassy in the US. I work with community leaders from the diaspora communities who are of Nigerian origin based here in Minnesota. They do hold events yearly. They invite leadership from Nigeria to come to Minnesota and and host those expo or business initiative that I support personally, and I do give presentations in that. We have protocol visits from Nigerian leadership that comes up. I think we had an organization of 18 states from Nigeria that we hosted here in Minnesota, and it was so great to learn of all the opportunities that we can partner with. So there is that state-to-state level connection. We have Nigerian states that are visiting here in Minnesota, and we at some point will have to do a trade mission in the coming years to African continent, and of course Nigeria is one of our top destinations to go to. And when we go to these trade missions, we take businesses with us so they can meet the businesses, and this will be great opportunities that we will advertise, and people can sign up to meet the businesses that will come with us. At a personal level, I do work with great leaders from the Nigerian community here in Minnesota. And please, if you know anyone that is based in Minnesota that is of a Nigerian origin, get contact with them. Let's work together to increase the businesses from Minnesota to Nigeria and vice versa.
Thanks for that. I can see from the chat your fan club is growing leaps and bounds. A lot of people want to get in touch with you, which is a good thing. Nshimi Yamana, let me come to you and ask you about intra-YALI business partnerships. Specifically, how much has the YALI experience helped you grow your business? And how much of your business are you doing with people you have met through YALI?
Yes, I think the is one of the best programs. The biggest, and it meet different level people, because I was people mainly were in businesses, and so when you speak the same language, business language, it is so of you can be
So we're having some problems hearing you. Yamana. If we could sort those out. Can you hear me? Let me, while we're waiting for you to sync back in, because I want to come back to this, because I think it's really quite important. I want to ask Toyin, there's been some questions here in the chat about how exporters from Africa know that their product is a fit for the U.S. market. And it sort of begs the question of how much is Prosper Africa focused on promoting U.S. investment in Africa, and how much does Prosper Africa help African entrepreneurs get into the U.S. market?
Well, as I mentioned, it's a whole of government approach, and we see this as a two-way initiative. And so it's African-based businesses. It's also African investors looking for opportunities in the U.S., and also U.S. businesses and investors looking for opportunities on the continent. So for African businesses on the continent, I would strongly recommend, our first place is the trade and investment programs across the continent that help African entrepreneurs and business leaders with matchmaking and due diligence. And so if you're looking to maximize on AGOA or how to get your product ready for that, these tools and resources are available to help you tailor your business, identify any gaps that you may have to really just get you ready for trade, or if you're looking for an investment how to prepare your business for that. Our embassy deal teams will probably, also guide you back to the trade and investment programs, but they're really there to help, African businesses on the continent with the kind of market intelligence that they need for the U.S. market. So if you're looking for, intelligence on exporting and agriculture, or you're a tech business and you want to, look at how you can grow your business across border, or maybe you're into fashion or apparel. And so that's what the embassy deal teams, but also the trade and investment program. So I say this all to say that there's a lot of resources there. And so again, this is just another, message I have is to go to prosperafrica.gov and also download our toolkit. And so through our toolkits, you'll be able to see whether you're looking. We haven't broken down if you're an African business looking to invest in the U.S. or you're looking to export to the U.S. You'll see very specific and tailored tools for your business.
And the first stop should be really to prosperafrica.gov. And
yes, it's really there, and through that you'll be able to see all of the tools and resources. And of course, we'll still guide you if you have specific questions. Because, like I said, we're working through 17 partner agencies, so there's a lot out there. And so it's really just about getting, being your guide and getting you that information. And we're here to assist.
Yeah. So before I go back to you, Shimana, let me just respond to one question that's come in, and that's about the future of AGOA. AGOA is set to expire in 2025, and I think we're just beginning a discussion here in the United States about what is the future of AGOA. I think there's a sense that it's been a very successful program on the one hand, but more countries probably could take better advantage of it at the same time. The U.S. has started negotiations with Kenya on a free trade agreement, and I think there's also thought we need to move to reciprocity with the bigger markets on the continent. And then, of course, there's the African Continental Free Trade Agreement, which is, really the number one game in town. How can the U.S. support that? So that's a way of saying that I think it's a very fluid situation right now. AGOA won't expire till 2025. So the more ideas that we can get from the continent, the more ideas that U.S. business comes forward to really help shape that debate, I think that will help better direct the future of U.S.-Africa trade policy. But I just say that as an interested observer and somebody who's been involved in this. I'm sure our speakers have other thoughts as well, and certainly we look forward to hearing them. Nishimana, let me go back to you to pick up that conversation about how the YALI network helped you grow your businesses. Hear you. Can you unmute? Unfortunately, we're gonna get that worked out. Okay, while we're trying to work out those technical issues, Abdul, there are a lot of big companies in Minnesota, right? There's Land O'Lakes, there's 3M, there are many. But what about the small and medium companies? How do you work with them? I mean, they don't have the resources to get on the planes, go over and spend a month to get to know people and do that. How do you deal with small companies from Minnesota going into Africa, but also the small companies coming from Africa into Minnesota?
Thank you, Mr. Woodley. That has been the focus of my my work here, to connect small and medium companies. I am originally was born and raised in Africa, then immigrated here, and I've always been passionate about connecting small and medium businesses. Now, if you look at our office, we mostly serve small and medium companies. Larger companies, they have their own, person, international sales manager, and that's all that. So, coming to the small and medium companies from Minnesota to Africa, we do have a couple initiatives that we have to support them. The first thing is we believe in travel and meeting people. So there is a small grant from the federal government and also matched by the state as well. We call the state trade export program, where even Minnesota business wants to travel, let's say, and meet someone in Nigeria to discuss business. We do reimburse 50% of their travel expenses in a way to get them out there and meet with people and break these deals. They as well can use the services at the embassy, the gold key services. These are services that they can take advantage. We also reimburse 50% of that if they wish to go that way. We also recruit companies to go with us on a trade mission, and these are mainly small and medium businesses that might not be able to travel on their own. So once we travel with them, we do arrange meetings for them. We at a shared space and handle the ground transportation and everything for them, so they can go and meet people out there. So these are initiatives that we help businesses with. We also have a trade helpline that if a business has went through and is talking to someone, we do anything from looking at the business, if that's a legitimate business. We help them go through the logistical and the technical know-how of exporting something from here to Africa. It's quite a lot of businesses are unfamiliar with these processes, so that's a way we help educate these businesses from this program. So that is as much as we help Minnesota businesses. We do help other small and medium businesses from Africa to come and meet with businesses in Minnesota. There's an initiative that we did. We call it the Buyers Mission, where we invite, we host an event and gather a couple of Minnesota companies, specifically around an industry, and say, okay, we want you to meet with businesses from the Africa region. We advertise these through the Chamber of Commerce, through the amazing network that we have, so that people in Africa, small and medium businesses, can attend these sessions for free and meet with businesses before they even think of travel and see if their product will match. I will also encourage the small and medium businesses in Africa to get in touch with their embassy here in the U.S. There's a consulate generals that are in these cities. We have, and think from Africa, we have a Liberian consulate here, a South African honorary consul. And we have a full consulate general from Ethiopia, and a couple other, Chamber of Commerce from, diaspora communities in Africa. So they do help a lot of do that connection and help these businesses from Africa to connect with businesses in Minnesota. So we do support as an office those initiatives, and that's how we can help Minnesota, businesses in Africa to come here.
Thanks for that. Yamana, can you hear? Are you back in the conversation?
Yes, I can hear. Do you hear me now?
Loud and clear. So
great.
Excellent. So let's go back to this, the YALI network and how that has helped you grow your business. And I'm interested, you came to the United States with a cohort of several hundred others, but then there's this larger YALI network of some several 100,000 across the continent. To what degree has the virtual and the real helped you grow your business?
Yeah, it's like I got extra hands. Now I had in the US. I know the Continental hub. It's the two-way to this network. When you go to a friend, but DRC, when you go to Morocco, when you go to anywhere in the continent, so exposure and are within the country, which could not be possible, during that network. A single individual would have Then let's go back to the US. I was the US before. This to travel to the US at life in the different states, and also work and meet entrepreneurs, and first-hand way US and also in the entrepreneurship language. I remember I left in 20. Yeah, yes, I was building my. I was thinking of some thousands, but today I afraid to think about a million of million USD worth of project. So as I said, I'm not, and we are proposing 20 million. To me, it's life changing. How do you from counting to think big and US dollars, billions of US dollars, just a short of time. What the where we had extended 6 weeks of running days from individuals seeing the experiences. Because, from being global, I when the ambassador traveled to Kenya and met another person in processing, and they managed. So it gives you a wide view and also a pool of networking. Also, I think gives you more opportunities and more hands.
That's awesome. I think this notion of going from being local to being global, I think that's really, it's a very powerful thought. I think, many of us, whether it's coming from Africa to the United States or from the United States into Africa, just sort of making that transition of understanding and developing the networks and relationships. So I think you've touched on a really important theme. And in the realm of relationships and networks, Toyin, we've had some questions in the box related to trade missions and sort of people coming from the continent to the U.S. And what is Prosper Africa doing in that space? Reference was made to the trade hubs, and just break that down to us. How can people connect in person with each other?
When we talk about trade missions, I know people have been, also bringing that up as well. USTDA, they do a reverse trade mission, and they have one coming up. Well, they were supposed to do one, but of course, due to COVID, that has been pushed back. But that's going to be focusing on accessing Africa's digital infrastructure. So the USTDA is hosting a delegation from South Africa and Ethiopia, and so they do a lot of the reverse trade missions, and we do expect more of these to come, especially as things change post COVID, hopefully. But there are those opportunities there, and we'd be glad to share some more information on upcoming trade missions, whether they are in different sectors that people are interested in. So reach out to us at Prosper Africa, depending on what your sector is. I just shared the one from USTDA, which is focused on digital infrastructure, but there are others.
Tori, just while I have you, we've been talking a lot about the opportunities, and I think everybody here in this conversation is representative of that. But what are the challenges that American businesses have going into the Africa market that you see most often, and how should American business think about dealing with those challenges and resolving them?
And I'd also like to add, USAID also missions that they work on as well. So, these are not just USTDA, but also USAID. And again, we can always provide more information of other missions. But when you talk about challenges that, US investors probably face going into the continent, again, various market sizes. And so, we want to make sure that we can help as many businesses also understand the varying sizes. We've heard from other businesses that we've worked with in adapting your business according to that specific market. So identifying how it may not work in the US, but how you can actually adapt that to work in the specific country that you're in, keeping in mind any digital challenges that you may face. Other things that we have put in to help businesses as well is, the Prosper Africa Toolkit to just give guidance on what's available through various agencies. There's DFC also offers political risk insurance, which is something that businesses as well have been able to take advantage of to help them in their investments on the continent. So, and maybe, also, lack of awareness on certain sectors and the opportunities there. Because as I mentioned, there are several sectors that we've worked in, major sectors that we've worked in, but we've also seen some growth in other areas. And so, also keeping an eye on those emerging opportunities in those sectors, post COVID-19.
And Abdul, let me ask you the same question. What do you see as the challenges? What sort of keeps you up at night about promoting U.S. investment in Africa and getting more African investment into the U.S.?
Great. I'm glad you asked that. We have, I normally classify these challenges into two. I say there's a lack of familiarity with doing business in Africa, and there's the trust issue. So, a business in Minnesota, in rural Minnesota, doing a farming equipment, let's say they have a seed processing equipment that they want to sell to Africa. The problem is they have lack of familiarity, the distance, the payment issue. Am I going to get paid? Those kind of, unsure market needs. Those are the kind of issues that normally really keep us awake a lot. The way we counter these is we want businesses to connect with people out there. We want businesses to go on a trade mission. We want businesses to travel. That's why we reimburse 50% of their travel costs. We always recommend the reverse pitch issue that I've said earlier in another meeting. Where the federal agencies like MCC, DFC, they host this, kind of a reverse pitch competition where small and medium companies from the continent can pitch ideas and say, if DFC says we have this problem that we need this innovation for, and have the YALI leadership, leaders from the YALI network pitch these ideas from their startups, their innovations, and fund those projects if they win. That is a great initiative I see as a way to have businesses come from Africa to the US, but also a lot of the meet people, travel out there, get involved in trade missions, work with the diaspora communities. We leverage a lot of the diaspora communities here. They have organized themselves into Chamber of Commerce. We have the Minnesota Africa United, for example, that there's an annual symposium to connect businesses from Minnesota to Africa, and we as a state support these initiatives. So we want to leverage the diaspora communities and get beyond this trust issue that the Minnesota businesses and other businesses across the U.S. are showing. So we keep thinking about innovative ideas we can involve and go past these challenges. And I think the African Free Trade Agreement will also, generalize the market. And if there's a one trade hub that not a hub, but one trade policy that is out there. These trade tariffs are lifted across Africa. You can just import to one country, and you can get your shipments from, let's say, South Africa to an East African country. That is what will help these businesses from Minnesota get past this issue. So as we continue to 2021, 2022, we keep thinking of these innovative ideas that we can bring businesses together.
Thanks so much for that. And Chidimma, you've seen it from both sides. You've come to the U.S. and seen business in Africa. You're doing business in Africa to the U.S. What is your advice to young entrepreneurs on the continent who want to build their businesses across the continent or to do business with the U.S.?
Yeah, thank you. I think my biggest advice would be to for the young Africans to keep doing what they're doing well, keep engaged. My biggest of all advice, all suggestions will come to the youth community. It's how to change, expose every people think of. So if the media on the US side changes, because I know they ask me, do you have Lion? And the issue is broken. And a very big connection for each other. My perspective and today. So big the on the US side about what they do not know about Africa. They don't even want Africa because they get malaria. They don't want to get HIV. They don't get, the opportunities. Even they just want to live in Serena. They don't. And Africa is about community. One big that the person and Africa here things do not the US, but we take, and also what is portrayed is what we building block for engagement. I think to me that's my greatest suggestion for the Africans. They are doing the great work, and
that's terrific. I certainly agree with that. Just programs like YALI, conversations like this today, just sort of getting to know each other, but there's no substitute for really going to each other's countries, cities, communities, and sort of sitting with each other. Tony, let me ask you what your advice is for the young entrepreneurs in Africa about building their business and partnering with American businesses.
My advice is, again, visit us at prosperafrica.gov and also just continue to work hard on your businesses, continue to do the market research, and in any ways that we can help with the market research so that you can best tailor your businesses, maybe looking for cross-border growth. So, we are very proud of the work that members of YALI have been doing over the years, and Prosper Africa would definitely be here to support as much as we can. So prosperafrica.gov.
Yeah, that's great. And Abdul, let me give you the last word here. You're born in Africa. You live in the United States. You promoted businesses on both sides. What's your advice to the young African entrepreneur who wants to build their business and connect with the U.S.?
Oh, thank you. It gets personal for me. Thinking back, as a young African leader in East Africa, trying to connect with businesses here. What would I have done? If I were me, I would think of it two ways. If I wanted to work with a U.S. business that wanted to come to my country, or if I wanted to bring stuff here to the U.S. There are different ways I can engage in those two fronts. Starting with the first, if I was in Africa and I was trying to work with a U.S. business, I would really become an authority in that industry. For example, if I am in the agribusiness, I'd work with the U.S. Chamber of Commerce. I would work with, I'll create organizations that are like-minded like me that will bring resources together. Because the biggest challenge we have is when a U.S. business gets to, let's say, too small for a product like that. Once you have an organization that is from your industry, people who have done distributorship for these companies together, you can do this. So I would really organize and at the local level, companies that are like-minded and try to negotiate and work with businesses from the US. How can you get these businesses? Attend trade missions, work with the embassy, see if they have any reverse missions that are coming up. Just know from your local business community what is going on, because to know is the best important thing. If you wanted to export, let's say you have a product in Africa, you want to get it to Minnesota, for example. Again, work with people here in Minnesota. Start with the Minnesota Trade Office, our foreign offices. See what opportunities are there for your specific product. People come with a general idea. Say, I want to export stuff to Africa, and I don't know what to the US, and I don't know what to export. As Toyin said, work on your product. Have a work plan, then approach the Minnesota Trade Office or any other state trade office or the embassy. Know what is going on. If there is a reverse speech that is happening, if there is a reverse mission that is happening in Minnesota, work with, again, I cannot stress more on people. Work with the people here. Minnesota's diaspora communities have had a lot of engagements. I've seen someone who has distributorship rights for Kenya's trade, for example, tea producing an agency, and they distribute, and they're from Minnesota. So you contact with people like that person, work with them, see how you can be a sole distributor for your country's sitting in the US, and work with people here. So those are great ways that I would have done if I was, either in Africa or here in Minnesota.
Great. Well, thanks for that. Let me just close with this note or this thought to share with everybody who's participating in it. It's this. You should have no doubt about America's commitment to Africa. When the African Growth and Opportunity Act was passed in 2000, 22 years ago, 21 years ago, it created this bipartisan consensus in Congress that the U.S. has investments on the continent worth investing in. And that momentum has just been growing ever since. So you saw AGOA, you saw the creation of the Millennium Challenge account under the Bush administration. You saw the Young Africa Leaders Initiative being created by President Obama, Empower Africa. Even in the last administration, you saw the creation of the $60 billion Development Finance Corporation, and indeed Prosper Africa. So this is just America's way of learning about Africa and deepening the connection, and it's only going to get deeper, I'm sure, not only by conversations like the one we're having today, but many others that I'm sure that will take place in the coming weeks and months and years. So thank you all for taking time to be here with us. Let me thank our panelists for great presentations and the inspiration and the insights. And I just wish you all a wonderful day, and just please stay in touch and figure out how we can continue to deepen the U.S.-African relationship. Thank you very much.